She found him at sunset, swaying in the saddle like a ghost caught between this world and the next. His arms were locked around two small bundles pressed against his chest, and his lips had turned the color of a winter sky. The babies weren't crying anymore. Neither was he breathing right. "Dear God," Clara May Thornton whispered and started running. "Before we ride deeper into this tale of sacrifice and second chances, I'd love to know, what city are you watching from? Drop it in the comments so I can see how far this story travels across our great country. And if you haven't already, subscribe and stay with me until the very end. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next." The December wind cut across the Wyoming prairie like a blade, carrying with it the kind of cold that settled into bones and stayed there. Clara May Thornton stood on the porch of the ranch house her husband had built 3 years before he died, watching the sun bleed red across the frozen grassland. She wasn't expecting anyone. Nobody came to Thornton Creek Ranch in winter unless they were lost or desperate. The figure appeared on the horizon just as the last light began to fade. At first, Clara thought her eyes were playing tricks, the way they sometimes did when loneliness stretched too long and the mind started seeing things that weren't there. But this was real. A horse, a man, something terribly, terribly wrong. "Lord have mercy," she breathed. She grabbed her shawl and ran down the porch steps, her boots crunching through the thin layer of ice that had formed over yesterday's snow. The cold bit at her face, her hands, but she didn't slow down. The horse, a gray gelding she recognized as belonging to Caleb Harding, the quiet cowboy who'd worked her ranch since spring had stopped moving. Steam rose from his flanks. His head hung low with exhaustion. And Caleb was still in the saddle, but barely. His body tilted at an angle that defied gravity. His arms were wrapped around something, no two somethings pressed tight against his chest. "Caleb!" Clara shouted. No response. She reached the horse and grabbed the bridle, steadying the exhausted animal. Then she looked up at the man, and her heart nearly stopped. His face was gray. His lips were blue. Frost clung to his eyebrows, his beard the edges of his hat. His eyes were closed, and he wasn't moving except for the shallow, rasping breaths that barely stirred his chest. But his arms, those arms were locked tight around two small bundles wrapped in what looked like a woman's blood-stained shawl. And from those bundles came a sound Clara hadn't heard in 3 long years. The weak, desperate cry of babies. "Oh God! Oh dear God!" Clara reached up, her hands shaking. "Caleb, can you hear me? Caleb?" His eyes didn't open, but his arms tightened reflexively around the babies. "It's Clara," she said, forcing her voice to stay calm. "You're at Thornton Creek. You're home. You need to let me have them now." Nothing. "Caleb, please. Those babies need help. You need help. Let go." For a terrible moment, she thought he couldn't. Thought his arms had frozen in that position that she'd have to pry them loose like breaking branches from a tree. Then slowly his grip loosened. Clara caught the first baby as it slipped from his arm, a girl she saw immediately with dark hair and skin too pale from cold. The infant was limp, but breathing, her tiny fingers curled into fists. "Charlie!" Clara screamed toward the bunkhouse. "Charlie, get out here now!" She tucked the first baby against her chest and reached for the second. Another girl, identical to the first. Twins. The moment both babies were free, Caleb's body gave up. He slumped forward, then sideways, and Clara barely managed to step back before he fell from the saddle and hit the frozen ground with a sound that made her stomach turn. "Caleb!" He didn't move. Running footsteps behind her. Charlie Redmond, her oldest ranch hand, came around the corner of the barn and stopped dead. "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, is that? Help me get him inside?" Clara ordered, her voice sharp with fear. "Now, Charlie, he's dying." Together they half-carried, half-dragged Caleb toward the house. The man was dead weight, his body completely slack. Clara's arms ached from holding the twins and trying to support him at the same time. "Billy!" Charlie shouted over his shoulder. "Get that horse to the barn. Cool him down slow. Then get Doc Morrison from town." "Doc ain't in town," a young voice called back. Saw him ride out to the Henderson place this morning. Mrs. Henderson's time came early. Clara's jaw tightened. No doctor. Fine. She'd delivered calves and stitched up ranch hands. She could handle this. They got Caleb through the front door and laid him on the sofa. Clara handed the twins to Charlie. Hold them, don't drop them, and knelt beside the unconscious cowboy. His clothes were stiff with dried blood, some of it old and brown, some newer and darker. She worked at the buttons of his shirt with fingers that wouldn't stop trembling. Whose blood is this? She muttered. Caleb, what happened to you? His eyes flickered open. Clara froze. The babies, he rasped. His voice sounded like gravel scraping over stone. Safe. They're safe. They're right here. His eyes found the twins in Charlie's arms, and something in his face changed. Relief. Profound, bone-deep relief. Thank God, he whispered. Thank God. Then his eyes rolled back, and he was gone again. Clara pressed her ear to his chest. His heart was beating faint, irregular, but there. His breathing was shallow, his skin cold as marble. Charlie, bring me blankets, all of them, and get water heating on the stove. What about the babies, ma'am? Give them here. Clara took the twins and carried them to the kitchen where warmth from the stove had kept the room bearable. She laid them on the table, unwrapping the bloody shawl to check for injuries. They were thin, too thin. Their diapers were soaked through their skin red with cold. But there were no wounds, no blood that was theirs. Someone else's blood, Clara murmured, rewrapping them in clean towels. Someone else died to keep you safe. The twins looked up at her with dark, solemn eyes. They weren't crying anymore, just watching, as if waiting to see what she would do. Clara felt something crack open in her chest. Something she'd sealed shut 3 years ago when she'd buried her daughter Emmeline in the hard Wyoming ground. You're safe now, she told them, her voice breaking. Whatever happened, you're safe. She fed them first warm milk soaked into clean cloth strips, the way her mother had taught her. The babies latched on hungrily, desperately, their small hands grasping at the cloth. When's the last time someone fed you? Clara whispered. A day 2. The twins just kept eating. When they'd had their fill and drifted into exhausted sleep, Clara laid them in the top drawer of her dresser, lined with soft blankets. Then she went back to deal with Caleb. He was still unconscious, but his color had improved slightly. Charlie had stripped off his bloody shirt and covered him with quilts. The ranch hand stood nearby, his weathered face grim. Looks like he's been through hell and back, ma'am. Bruises all over. Cuts on his arms. And his hands. Clara looked at Caleb's hands lying limp on top of the quilt. They were torn and bloody rope burns circling his wrists. He tied himself to the saddle, she realized, so he wouldn't fall, so he wouldn't drop those babies. Charlie shook his head slowly. That's 40 miles from Dead Man's Crossing to here, in this weather, carrying 2 infants. 40 miles. Yes, ma'am. I'd bet my wages that's where he came from. Only place northwest of here where a wagon train might have been. Clara stared at Caleb's face, the hard angles softened by exhaustion, the lines of pain etched around his eyes and mouth. She'd worked alongside this man for 8 months and barely knew him. He showed up, did his job, kept to himself. Never talked about his past, never mentioned family, never stayed after supper to chat with the other hands. And now he'd nearly killed himself riding 40 miles through a December blizzard to bring 2 orphaned babies to her door. Why? Around midnight, Caleb woke again. Clara was sitting in the chair beside the sofa, a cup of cold coffee forgotten in her hands. She'd dozed off despite trying to stay awake, and the sound of his voice pulled her back. Mrs. Thornton? She sat up sharply. Caleb, you're awake. He tried to push himself upright and winced, pressing a hand to his ribs. Clara moved to help him, propping pillows behind his back. Easy now. You've got at least 2 cracked ribs, maybe more. The twins, sleeping peacefully, fed and cleaned and warm. She handed him a cup of water. Drink this. Then tell me what happened." Caleb drained the cup, then another. His hands shook as he held it. "I was riding the north fence line," he said finally, "checking for breaks before the next storm hits. Heard gunshots." Clara's stomach tightened. "By the time I got there..." Caleb's jaw worked. Wagon was burning. 5 people dead, shot where they stood. 5 people. 3 men, 2 women, settlers by the look of them, heading west with everything they owned. His voice went flat. The men who did it were still there, going through the wagon, laughing. Clara felt sick. "Did they see you?" "No, ma'am. I stayed hidden, watched them ride off." He looked down at his torn hands. "Then I went to check if anyone was alive." "And you found the babies?" "Hidden under the wagon floorboards. Someone had shoved them in there and closed it up tight. There was a note pinned to their blanket." Clara's breath caught. "A note." Caleb reached into his vest pocket, his movements stiff and painful, and pulled out a piece of paper. It was crumpled and stained, but the writing was still legible. Clara took it and read aloud, her voice unsteady. "Please, if someone finds them, their names are Hope and Honor Morrison. Born August 3rd, 1876. They are good babies. They deserve to live. Tell them their mama loved them. Tell them I'm sorry I couldn't protect them better. May God keep them safe. Sarah Morrison." The words blurred. Clara blinked hard, refusing to let the tears fall. "She knew," she said. "That mother knew she was about to die, and she used her last minutes to hide her children, to give them a chance." Caleb nodded slowly. "I couldn't leave them there. Couldn't let them die in that wagon with their families' bodies around them. So you brought them here, 40 miles, in the worst cold we've had all winter." "Yes, ma'am." "Why?" The question came out sharper than she intended. "The town's closer. The sheriff's office is there. Why bring them here?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "I thought about it. Town's got more people, more resources." He paused. "But I kept thinking about you." Clara stiffened. "Me?" "I've worked this ranch 8 months, Mrs. Thornton. Watched you run it alone after your husband passed. Watched you deal with dishonest buyers and stubborn cattle and men who tried to take advantage because you're a woman on her own." He met her eyes. "I've seen who you are when no one's watching. Fair, kind, strong." Clara couldn't speak. "Those babies needed someone who wouldn't just take them in because it was the right thing to do," Caleb continued. "They needed someone who would love them, someone who would fight for them." He paused. "I figured if anyone would do that, it would be you." The silence stretched between them, heavy with things neither of them knew how to say. "You nearly died," Clara finally managed. "You nearly killed yourself and that horse to bring them here." "Yes, ma'am." "Don't you dare ma'am me right now." Her voice cracked. "You could have stopped, made camp, waited for the weather to clear. And those babies might have died waiting. They hadn't been fed in at least a day, maybe more. They were too cold, too weak." Caleb's eyes held hers. "I couldn't stop. I couldn't let them down. Not when they'd already lost everything." Clara looked away, pressing her hand to her mouth. She understood. God help her, she understood completely. 3 years ago, she would have done anything to save Emmeline, anything at all. "Get some sleep," she said, her voice thick. "We'll figure out the rest in the morning." "Mrs. Thornton." "Clara." She wasn't sure why she said it. "My name is Clara." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Clara, then." She turned to go check on the twins, but his voice stopped her. "Those babies Hope and Honor, they're going to need someone." "I know. I mean really need someone. Not just for a few days or weeks. Forever." Clara turned back to look at him. This man who'd ridden through hell with 2 babies in his arms. Who'd chosen her out of everyone to trust with their lives. "I know," she said again. "Go to sleep, Caleb." She left him there and went to her bedroom where the twins slept peacefully in their dresser drawer cradle. Clara stood over them for a long time, watching their tiny chests rise and fall. Hope and Honor Morrison, 4 months old, orphaned by violence, saved by a stranger, brought to a widow who'd sworn she'd never let herself love again. "Your mama loved you," Clara whispered to them. "She loved you enough to die for you. And I—" She couldn't finish. Couldn't make a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. But standing there in the moonlight, watching 2 innocent babies sleep, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in 3 long years. Hope. And it terrified her. Morning came with the kind of silence that only deep winter knows. Clara hadn't slept. Every time she'd closed her eyes, she'd heard the babies crying, or seen Caleb falling from his horse, or worse, she'd seen Emmeline's face pale and still the way it had looked at the end. So she'd stayed awake, fed the twins twice more during the night, checked on Caleb every hour to make sure he was still breathing, paced the floors until her feet ached. Now, as gray light crept through the windows, she stood over the stove making coffee and trying not to think about what came next. "You look like death warmed over." Clara spun around. Caleb stood in the kitchen doorway, one hand braced against the frame, his face tight with pain. "You shouldn't be up," she said sharply. "Couldn't sleep." He limped to the table and lowered himself into a chair with a grunt. "Keep thinking about those outlaws. They saw my tracks leaving Dead Man's Crossing. Won't take them long to figure out where I went." Clara's hands stilled on the coffee pot. "You think they'll come here?" "I think they killed 5 people to steal a wagon full of furniture and farm tools. They ain't the type to leave witnesses." Caleb's eyes met hers. "I'm sorry. I should have thought about that before I brought danger to your door. You brought 2 babies who needed help. That's not something to apologize for. It is if it gets you killed." The words hung between them. Clara poured 2 cups of coffee and set one in front of him, her movements deliberate and calm, even though her heart was racing. "I've got a rifle. I know how to use it. And Charlie's been with this ranch since my husband built it. He's not going to let anything happen." "Charlie's 1 man. Those outlaws are 4. Then we'll send word to the sheriff." Caleb shook his head. "Sheriff Morrison's a good man, but he's in town 40 miles away. If those men decide to come, they'll be here long before any help arrives." Clara sat down across from him, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup. "So what do you suggest?" "I leave. Draw them away from here. Let them follow me instead of—" "No." "Mrs. Thornton." "Clara." "And no." She leaned forward, her voice fierce. "You can barely stand. You've got cracked ribs and God knows what else. You ride out of here, you'll die before you make it 10 miles. Better me than you and those babies." "Nobody's dying." Clara's jaw tightened. "We'll figure this out. Together. But I'm not letting you sacrifice yourself when you've already nearly killed yourself once." Caleb stared at her for a long moment. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise maybe, or something deeper. "You're a stubborn woman, Clara Thornton. I've been called worse." A sound from the bedroom, the thin wail of a hungry baby, broke the tension. Clara pushed back from the table. "That'll be Hope. She's the impatient one." "How can you tell them apart?" Clara paused at the doorway. "Hope fusses louder. Honor just watches and waits." She didn't know how she knew this. She'd only had the babies for 1 night, but somehow already she could feel the difference between them. That scared her more than the outlaws. She fed the twins in the kitchen while Caleb watched his face unreadable. When she'd finished and was burping Hope against her shoulder, he spoke again. "You're good at this." "I've done it before." The words came out flat, final. A door closing. But Caleb didn't take the hint. "You had a child." Clara's hands tightened on Hope's small body. "I had a daughter. Emmeline. She died 3 years ago. Scarlet fever." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was a long time ago." 3 years isn't that long." Clara looked up at him, ready to snap back something sharp. But the look in his eyes stopped her. It wasn't pity. It wasn't empty sympathy. It was recognition. "You've lost someone too," she said quietly. Caleb's jaw worked. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Wife and son. 8 years ago." Clara's breath caught. "How?" "Raiders. I was away fighting in a war that wasn't mine. Came home to find—" He stopped, his voice going rough. "Found what was left of our cabin. Never found them." "Oh, Caleb. It was a long time ago." He threw her own words back at her, but without malice. "That's what we tell ourselves, isn't it? That time makes it easier. That the hole gets smaller." "Does it?" "No, we just get better at walking around it." Hope burped loudly, breaking the heaviness of the moment. Clara almost would have laughed if her chest didn't ache so badly. "She's got strong lungs," Caleb observed. "She's got strong everything. This one's going to be trouble." "Good. She'll need to be growing up in this country." Clara looked at him sharply. Growing up. He was already thinking about their future, already assuming they'd have one. That she'd be part of it. "We don't even know if they have family," she said. "The sheriff will have to investigate. Find out if there's anyone to claim them." "And if there isn't?" The question hung in the air. Clara didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Charlie knocked on the kitchen door an hour later, his face grim. "Rider coming up the road, ma'am. Looks like Sheriff Morrison." Clara's stomach dropped. "Already? How did he—" Henderson's boy must have gotten word to him somehow. Or maybe he was already on his way. Charlie glanced at Caleb. Either way, he's going to want answers. They met the sheriff on the porch. Tom Morrison was a man in his 50s, with iron-gray hair and the kind of weathered face that spoke of too many hard winters and harder decisions. He dismounted slowly, his eyes moving from Clara to Caleb to the house behind them. "Mrs. Thornton, heard there was trouble." "News travels fast." "Got a rancher came into town this morning, said he found bodies at Dead Man's Crossing. 5 of them. Wagon burned, belongings scattered." Morrison's gaze fixed on Caleb. "He also said he found tracks leading away from the scene. Single horse heading southeast, toward this ranch." Caleb stepped forward. "Those tracks are mine, Sheriff." "I figured as much." Morrison's expression didn't change. "Want to tell me what happened?" Caleb told him. All of it: the gunshots, the burning wagon, the outlaws laughing as they picked through dead people's belongings, the babies hidden under the floorboards. Morrison listened without interrupting, his face growing grimmer with each detail. When Caleb finished, the sheriff was quiet for a long moment. "You saw their faces. Clear as day. I could pick them out of a crowd." "Good, because I'm going to need you to do exactly that." Morrison reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a stack of papers. "These came through from the U.S. Marshal's office last month. Wanted posters for a gang that's been hitting wagon trains all across the territory." He spread the papers on the porch railing. 4 faces stared up at them, hard men with harder eyes. Caleb pointed to 2 of them immediately. "That one, and that one. They were there." "You're sure?" "I'm sure." Morrison gathered up the posters, his jaw tight. "Jacob Kincaid and his brother Samuel. The other 2 are probably Roy Dalton and Marcus Webb. They ride together, been wanted for robbery and murder in 3 territories." He looked at Clara. "These are dangerous men, Mrs. Thornton. Real dangerous." "I gathered that from the 5 dead bodies." "I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to prepare you." Morrison turned back to Caleb. "Did they see you?" "No, sir. I stayed hidden until they rode out. But they'll see your tracks. They'll know someone was there, someone who might have seen what they did." The sheriff's voice was heavy. "Men like the Kincaids don't leave loose ends." Clara felt ice form in her stomach. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you need to be careful. Real careful." Morrison paused. "I can leave a deputy here for a few days, but I can't spare men for long. Got the whole territory to cover and only 4 deputies to do it. We don't need a deputy, Caleb said. We need guns and ammunition, and maybe a few more hands who know how to use them. Morrison nodded slowly. I can arrange that. There's men in town who'd ride out to help if I asked them. Good men. Then ask them. Clara's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. Ask them, Sheriff. Because I've got 2 babies in that house who've already lost everything. I'm not going to let them lose anything more. The sheriff's eyes softened. The Morrison twins. I heard about them from the rancher. Said the note mentioned they were related to me, same last name at least. Sarah Morrison was their mother. Does that mean anything to you? Morrison shook his head slowly. Morrison's a common enough name. I don't recognize it, but I'll look into it. See if there's any connection, any family who might claim them. Something in Clara's chest tightened painfully. Family who might claim them. Of course, that was the right thing to hope for. Wasn't it? That these babies had someone out there who would want them. Then why did the thought make her feel like she was drowning? In the meantime, Morrison continued, those babies need someone to care for them. Are you willing, Mrs. Thornton? Yes. The word came out before she could think about it. Yes, I'm willing. Then I'll draw up temporary guardianship papers. Make it legal at least until we can figure out what's what. He tipped his hat. I'll send that deputy out by nightfall, and I'll round up some men to track those outlaws. They won't get away with this. After the sheriff rode off, Clara stood on the porch for a long time, staring at the horizon. Caleb came to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him despite the bitter cold. You didn't hesitate, he said quietly. What? When Morrison asked if you were willing to take the babies, you didn't even think about it. Clara wrapped her arms around herself. They need someone. I'm here. It's not complicated. It's very complicated. You barely know them. You've got a ranch to run, a life of your own. Taking on 2 babies. I had a daughter. Clara's voice cracked, and she hated herself for it. I had a daughter, and I lost her, and I swore I would never. I couldn't. She broke off, unable to continue. Caleb didn't touch her, didn't offer empty comfort. He just stood there, solid and silent, waiting for her to find her way through. When Emmeline died, Clara finally said, I thought I would die too. I wanted to. For months I wanted to just close my eyes and not wake up. She took a shaky breath. But I didn't. I kept going. Kept running this ranch, kept putting one foot in front of the other, and I told myself that was enough. That surviving was enough. But it wasn't. No, it wasn't. It was just existing, just going through the motions. She finally looked at him. And then you showed up with 2 babies in your arms, half dead, and still holding on. And I thought maybe this is why. Maybe this is why I'm still here. Caleb's eyes held hers. Maybe it is. Or maybe I'm just a fool who's going to get her heart broken again. Maybe. But at least you'll have tried. Clara almost laughed. That's supposed to make me feel better. No. It's supposed to make you feel brave. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. You're the bravest woman I've ever met, Clara Thornton. Taking in 2 orphans, standing up to outlaws, letting yourself feel something after everything you've lost. That's not foolish. That's courage. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him. But 3 years of grief had taught her to be careful with hope. It was a fragile thing, easily shattered. We should check on the babies, she said, turning away. Clara. She stopped, but didn't turn around. I'm not going anywhere, Caleb said. Whatever happens with those outlaws, whatever happens with the babies, I'm staying. If you'll let me. Clara closed her eyes. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Why? She whispered. Because those babies need protecting. Because this ranch needs defending. A pause. Because you shouldn't have to do any of it alone. She turned then, and the look in his eyes nearly undid her. There was no pity there, no charity. Just a man offering what he had to give. "All right," she said. "Stay." The word felt like jumping off a cliff, like letting go of something she'd been holding on to for so long, she'd forgotten it was even there. Caleb nodded once, and that was that. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that was both exhausting and strangely comforting. Clara cared for the twins while Caleb healed his strength, returning faster than she'd expected. The Deputy Morrison sent a young man named Pete, who jumped at shadows, proved more hindrance than help, so Clara mostly ignored him. What she couldn't ignore was Caleb. He was everywhere, fixing the loose board on the porch that she'd been meaning to get to for months, chopping wood for the stove, checking the horses, mending tack, doing the work of 3 men despite his cracked ribs, and always finding excuses to come back to the house, to check on the babies, to help with feedings and changings, to sit in the kitchen while Clara cooked his presence solid and warm. "You don't have to do this," she told him one evening, watching as he expertly burped Honor over his shoulder. "The babies aren't your responsibility. Neither are they yours. But here we are. That's different. I chose to take them in." Caleb looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "You think I didn't choose? I could have left them at that wagon. Could have brought them to town and handed them off to the first person willing. But I didn't. I brought them here. To you." He paused. "That was a choice." "Why? You still haven't really told me why." Caleb was quiet for a long moment, his hand moving in slow circles on Honor's back. "When I found them," he finally said, "they were looking at me. Both of them, these big dark eyes, just watching, waiting to see if I was safe." His voice roughened. "And I thought about my boy, James. He was 2 when the raiders came. 2 years old, and I wasn't there to protect him." Clara's throat tightened. "I couldn't save James. I couldn't save Sarah. But those babies, Hope and Honor, I could save them. I could do for them what I couldn't do for my own family." He met Clara's eyes. "So I did. And I brought them to the one person I trusted to love them the way they deserve to be loved. You barely know me. I know enough." Caleb stood still, holding Honor, and crossed the kitchen to stand in front of Clara. "I know you get up twice every night to check on them, even when they're sleeping fine. I know you sing to them when you think no one's listening. I know you look at them like they're the most precious thing in the world, even though you're terrified of loving them." Clara couldn't breathe. "Caleb, I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But being scared doesn't mean we have to be alone." Before Clara could respond, the front door burst open, and Charlie rushed in, his face white. "Riders coming! 4 of them, and they ain't friendly!" Clara's blood turned to ice. Caleb handed Honor to her and grabbed the rifle from above the door. "How far?" "Mile, maybe less. Coming fast. Get the women and babies to the root cellar. Now!" Clara clutched Honor to her chest, her mind racing. "Caleb, no. You can't face 4 men alone. I won't be alone." He looked at Charlie. "You with me? To the end, boss." Caleb turned back to Clara, and for one terrible moment, she thought he was going to say goodbye. Thought he was going to tell her to remember him, to take care of the babies, to live a good life. Instead, he just said, "Get those children somewhere safe, then pray." And then he was gone, out into the gathering darkness, toward 4 men who had already killed 5 people and wouldn't hesitate to kill more. Clara stood frozen, Honor whimpering in her arms, her whole world narrowing to a single desperate thought. "Please God, not again. Don't take him too." Clara didn't go to the root cellar. She grabbed Hope from the bedroom, tucked both babies into a basket lined with blankets, and carried them to the kitchen. Then she took Thomas's old shotgun from the closet and loaded it with hands that refused to stop shaking. "Mrs. Thornton, you should hide," Deputy Pete started. "Get out of my way." "Ma'am, Mr. Harding said—" "I don't care what he said." Clara pushed past the young deputy and positioned herself by the kitchen window, the shotgun across her lap, the babies at her feet. Those men killed 5 people. You think they'll just ride away because Caleb asks nicely? Pete's face went pale. What do you want me to do? Watch the back door. Shoot anyone who comes through it that isn't one of ours. The deputy nodded and stumbled toward the back of the house. Clara turned her attention to the window, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Outside, she could see Caleb and Charlie crouched behind the water trough, rifles ready. The 4 riders had stopped about 50 yards from the house, close enough to talk, far enough to make a shot difficult. "Evening, gentlemen." The voice that called out was smooth, almost friendly. "Name's Jacob Kincaid. I believe you have something that belongs to us." Caleb's voice was steady. "Don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. 2 little bundles 'bout ye big." Kincaid held his hands apart. "Saw your tracks at the crossing, followed them all the way here. Now we ain't looking for trouble. Just want what's ours." Clara's grip tightened on the shotgun. Ours, like the babies were property, like they were things to be claimed. "Those babies don't belong to anyone," Caleb called back, "especially not to the men who murdered their family." A long pause, then Kincaid laughed. "Murder's a strong word, friend. We prefer to think of it as business." His voice hardened. "Now I'm going to give you one chance to hand over those babies and walk away. Otherwise, things are going to get real unpleasant real fast." "Why do you even want them?" Charlie's voice this time angry and confused. "They're just babies. What possible use could you have?" "That ain't your concern." Kincaid's horse shifted beneath him. "Last chance. Hand them over or we burn this place to the ground with everyone in it." Clara's blood ran cold. She looked down at Hope and Honor sleeping peacefully in their basket, completely unaware that men outside wanted them dead. Why? What could possibly make 2 4-month-old babies valuable enough to kill for? The answer hit her like a fist to the stomach. The note. Sarah Morrison's note. Something about it that Clara had missed, something that made these babies more than just orphans. "Go to hell," Caleb said. The first shot shattered the silence. Clara ducked as the window above her exploded inward, showering her with glass. The babies woke screaming, their cries piercing through the chaos of gunfire and shouting. "Stay down!" she screamed, though there was no one to hear her. More shots. She heard Charlie cry out, heard Caleb shouting something she couldn't make out. She risked a glance through the broken window and saw one of the outlaws down his horse bolting across the yard. 3 left. But Charlie was hit. She could see him slumped against the water trough, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. Caleb was still firing, still fighting, but he was 1 man against 3. It was only a matter of time. Clara made a decision. She grabbed the basket with the babies and shoved it into the corner farthest from the windows. Then she picked up the shotgun, kicked open the back door, and ran. The cold hit her like a wall, but she didn't stop. She circled around the house, staying low, using the shadows for cover. Her father had taught her to shoot before she was 10 years old. Thomas had made sure she practiced every week until the day he died. She'd never shot at a man before. Tonight, that was going to change. She came around the corner of the barn just as one of the outlaws, the big one, Marcus Webb, if the wanted poster was right, was trying to flank Caleb's position. He had his back to her. Clara raised the shotgun. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. "Hey!" Webb spun around and Clara pulled the trigger. The recoil knocked her backward, but she kept her feet. Webb went down hard, screaming, clutching at his leg. He wasn't dead, but he wasn't getting up anytime soon. "Clara!" Caleb's voice, shocked and furious. "What the hell are you—" "2 down!" she shouted back. "Focus!" Another shot rang out, and Clara heard it hit the barn wall, inches from her head. She dropped flat, the shotgun clutched to her chest, and scrambled for cover. "Well, well," Kincaid's voice closer now. "The lady of the house joins the party. I do admire a woman with spirit." Clara reloaded the shotgun with trembling fingers. "Spirit's not the only thing I've got." I can see that. A pause. You're making this harder than it needs to be, ma'am. We don't want to kill you. We just want those babies. Why? Clara shouted. What could you possibly want with 2 infant girls? Kincaid laughed. You really don't know, do you? Haven't read that note carefully enough. Sarah Morrison wasn't just any settler woman. Her daddy's a senator back in Virginia. A very rich senator. Those babies are worth a fortune in ransom. Clara's mind reeled. A senator's granddaughters. Worth a fortune. Their whole family's dead, she said. Who's going to pay ransom for them now? Their grandfather, obviously. Old man Morrison's got more money than God, and only one heir left those 2 babies. Kincaid's voice dropped lower. So you see, ma'am, this isn't personal. It's just business. Hand them over and we'll be on our way. No one else has to die. Except the babies eventually, once you've gotten your money. A long pause. Then, you're smarter than you look. Clara's jaw tightened. I'm a lot of things you don't expect. She heard movement to her left and swung the shotgun around just as the 3rd outlaw, Roy Dalton, came around the corner of the barn. But she was too slow. He grabbed the barrel of the shotgun and wrenched it from her hands, then backhanded her across the face. Clara hit the ground hard, her vision exploding into stars. She tasted blood. Got her, Dalton shouted. I got the woman. Excellent. Kincaid's voice was getting closer. Now, Mrs. Thornton, I'm going to ask you one more time. Where are those babies? Clara spat blood onto the frozen ground. Go to hell! Dalton hit her again, and this time the world went gray around the edges. She heard herself cry out, heard footsteps approaching, felt rough hands grab her arms and haul her upright. I'm losing patience, Kincaid said. He was right in front of her now, his face a blur through her swelling eye. Tell me where they are, or I'll start cutting pieces off. Clara's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might explode, but she lifted her chin and looked him in the eye. I'll die before I tell you anything. Kincaid smiled. That can be arranged. She heard him draw his knife, saw the blade glint in the moonlight, felt Dalton's grip tighten on her arms. And then everything happened at once. A rifle shot cracked through the air, and Dalton's grip vanished. Clara stumbled forward, nearly falling, and turned to see Dalton on the ground with a hole in his chest. Caleb was running toward them, rifle in hand, his face twisted with fury. Kincaid moved faster than Clara would have thought possible. He grabbed her around the throat and pressed his knife to her neck. Stop right there, he hissed. One more step and I'll open her up like a Christmas pig. Caleb froze. Drop the rifle. Let her go. The rifle, now. Caleb's eyes met Clara's. She could see the anguish in them, the impossible choice he was being forced to make. Don't, she whispered. Caleb, don't. The blade pressed harder against her throat. She felt blood trickle down her skin. Caleb dropped the rifle. Good boy. Kincaid's breath was hot against Clara's ear. Now kick it away. Caleb did. Very good. Now here's what's going to happen. You're going to go into that house, get those babies, and bring them out here. If you try anything clever, if you even look at me wrong, I'll kill her. Understand? I understand. Then move. Caleb started walking toward the house. His hands raised, his eyes never leaving Clara's face. And Clara knew with absolute certainty that the moment those babies were in Kincaid's hands, they were all dead. He couldn't leave witnesses. Couldn't risk anyone knowing what he'd done. She had one chance. Caleb, she said, her voice steady, despite the knife at her throat. Remember what you told me about saving those babies? He stopped, his eyes questioning. You said you did it because you couldn't save your own family. Because you wanted to do for them what you couldn't do for James and Sarah. Kincaid's grip tightened. Shut up. You were wrong. Clara continued, ignoring the pain. You didn't save them because of the past. You saved them because of the future. Because they deserve a chance at life. Because some things are worth dying for. I said shut up. And if I have to die to give them that chance... Clara took a breath, steeling herself. Then I will. She drove her elbow backward into Kincaid's stomach with everything she had. The knife slashed across her neck, shallow, not deep enough to kill, and then she was falling, twisting away from him, hitting the ground hard. Caleb moved. He was on Kincaid before the outlaw could recover both of them, going down in a tangle of fists and fury. Clara scrambled backward, her hand pressed to her bleeding neck, watching as Caleb fought with a violence she'd never seen before. This wasn't the quiet, steady man who burped babies and fixed porch steps. This was something else entirely, something forged in loss and rage and 8 years of guilt. Kincaid was bigger, stronger, but Caleb was fighting for something more than his own life. He was fighting for hope and honor, for Clara, for every person he'd ever lost, and every person he still had a chance to save. Kincaid managed to get his knife up, slashing at Caleb's arm. Blood sprayed across the snow, but Caleb didn't stop. He grabbed Kincaid's wrist, twisted, and the knife went flying. Then his hands were around Kincaid's throat. "This is for Sarah Morrison." Caleb said, his voice deadly calm. "This is for her husband and her brother and everyone else you murdered. This is for my wife, my son, everyone you and men like you have taken from this world." Kincaid's face was turning purple. His hands clawed at Caleb's arms, but he couldn't break the grip. "Caleb." Clara's voice was weak, but he heard her. "Caleb, stop." His hands didn't loosen. "He deserves to die." "I know he does, but not like this." Clara crawled toward him, her body screaming with pain. "Not in cold blood, not in front of me, not when we have children to raise and a life to build." Caleb's eyes met hers. The rage in them was terrifying, but beneath it, she could see the man she knew. The man who'd ridden 40 miles to save 2 babies. The man who'd chosen her. "Please," she whispered. "Let the law handle him. Let Sheriff Morrison hang him. But don't let his death be on your conscience. Don't give him that power over you." For a long, terrible moment, she thought he wouldn't listen, thought the rage would win. Then slowly Caleb's hands loosened. Kincaid collapsed, gasping and choking, but alive. Caleb stood swaying on his feet, blood dripping from his arm. He looked at Clara with eyes that were suddenly devastatingly vulnerable. "I almost... but you didn't." Clara reached up, and he helped her to her feet. "You didn't." They stood there for a moment, holding each other up, surrounded by the bodies of men who had tried to take everything from them. "The babies," Clara said suddenly. "I left them in the kitchen." "I'll go." Caleb's voice was rough. "Stay here. Keep an eye on him." He limped toward the house, and Clara watched him go. Then she picked up Caleb's dropped rifle and trained it on Kincaid's prone form. "Try anything," she said quietly, "and I won't miss." Kincaid just groaned. Caleb returned a few minutes later with both babies in his arms. They were crying, but they were alive, unhurt, safe. Clara felt tears streaming down her face as she looked at them. "They're okay," Caleb said. "They're okay, Clara." She dropped the rifle and reached for them, pulling them close, breathing in their scent. Hope grabbed a fistful of her hair. Honor just looked at her with those big, solemn eyes. "I've got you," Clara whispered. "I've got you, and I'm never letting go." Behind her, she heard horses approaching, voices. Sheriff Morrison's unmistakable drawl calling out, asking what happened. But Clara didn't care about any of that. She had 2 babies in her arms and a man standing beside her who had almost died to protect them. That was enough. That was everything. Sheriff Morrison arrived with 6 men from town. They took Kincaid and the wounded Webb into custody. Dalton and the unnamed 4th outlaw were dead. The sheriff surveyed the scene with grim satisfaction. "You 2 did this, just the 2 of you." 3, Caleb corrected. "Charlie was with us until he took a bullet." "How is he?" "He'll live." Bullet went clean through his shoulder. Morrison shook his head slowly. The Kincaid gang, wanted in 3 territories, and they were brought down by a widow, a cowboy, and an old ranch hand. "Don't forget the babies," Clara said tiredly. "They're the reason any of this happened." The sheriff's expression changed. "About that, I did some checking after I left here yesterday. Sent some telegrams." He paused. Sarah Morrison was the daughter of Senator William Morrison of Virginia. Those babies are his only surviving grandchildren. Clara's arms tightened around Hope and Honor. "Kincaid told us. He said they were going to ransom them." "That was his plan. The senator's worth millions. He would have paid anything to get those babies back." Morrison hesitated. "I've already wired the senator. He knows his granddaughters are alive and safe. He's sending someone to collect them." The words hit Clara like a physical blow. Collect them. They're his family. Mrs. Thornton, his blood. He has a legal right. He doesn't even know them. Clara's voice cracked. He's never held them or fed them or stayed up all night when they were crying. He's just a name to them. "Clara." Caleb's hand was on her arm, steadying her. "Clara, look at me." She turned, and through her tears she saw his face, tired, bloody, but determined. "We'll figure this out," he said. "Whatever happens, we'll figure it out together. Those babies aren't going anywhere until we've had a say. He's a senator, Caleb. He has money power lawyers. And we have something he doesn't." Caleb's eyes held hers. "We have love. We have fight. We have each other." "Is that enough?" "It has to be." Sheriff Morrison cleared his throat. "For what it's worth, I'm on your side. I'll do what I can to make sure the senator understands what you've done for those girls. Maybe he'll listen to reason. And if he doesn't..." The sheriff didn't answer. He didn't have to. Clara looked down at Hope and Honor, sleeping now, despite everything, their small bodies warm against her chest. She'd known these babies for 3 days. 3 days, and already she couldn't imagine her life without them. "I won't give them up," she said quietly. "I can't." Caleb's arm came around her shoulders. "Then we won't." It was a promise they might not be able to keep. A fight they might not be able to win. But standing there in the aftermath of violence, surrounded by death and blood and the bitter cold of a Wyoming winter, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not hope. Hope was too fragile. This was something fiercer. Something that had teeth. Determination. Whatever came next, senators, lawyers, custody battles, she would face it. She would fight. For hope. For honor. For the family that had been forged in fire and blood, and the desperate love of 2 broken people who had somehow found each other. The war with the outlaws was over, but the fight for her children was just beginning. The telegram arrived 3 days later. Clara was feeding Hope when Charlie limped in from the porch, his arm still in a sling, his face grim. He held out the yellow paper without a word. She took it with one hand, the baby balanced on her hip, and read the words that made her blood run cold. Arriving December 23rd. Stop. Expect full cooperation regarding my granddaughters. Stop. Senator William Morrison. December 23rd. That was tomorrow. Clara. Caleb appeared in the doorway, honor cradled against his chest. "What is it?" She handed him the telegram. Watched his face harden as he read it. He's not wasting any time. "Would you if you'd just learned your granddaughters were alive?" Clara's voice was bitter. He's probably been planning this since Sheriff Morrison's first telegram. Planning what exactly? To take them. To bring them back to Virginia and raise them as proper Morrison heirs. Clara pressed her lips to Hope's forehead, breathing in the sweet baby smell. They'll have everything. Money, education, society. Everything I can't give them. You can give them love. Love doesn't pay for tutors and fancy dresses. Love's worth more than all the tutors in the world. Caleb crossed to her, Honor reaching out a tiny hand toward her sister. Those babies don't need money. They need a family, a home, people who would die for them. We almost did die for them. Exactly. Caleb's eyes held hers. You think Senator Morrison would take a bullet for these girls? You think he'd ride 40 miles through a blizzard or face down 4 armed outlaws? He wouldn't have to. He'd hire someone to do it. That's not the same thing, and you know it. Clara did know it. But knowing didn't make the fear go away. What if he doesn't care about any of that? She whispered. What if all he sees is his legacy, his bloodline, his heirs? We're nobody to him, Caleb. A widow and a cowboy on a failing ranch in the middle of nowhere. Why would he listen to us? Because we're going to make him listen. How? Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then, marry me. Clara's heart stopped. What? Marry me. Today. Right now. His voice was urgent, intense. If we're married, we're a family. A real family, legal and proper. It won't be just a widow taking in strays. It'll be a husband and wife who want to adopt 2 orphaned girls. That has to count for something. Caleb, that's crazy desperate, probably. He reached out and touched her face, his rough hand gentle against her cheek. But I was going to ask you anyway. Maybe not today, maybe not for a few more weeks, but I was going to ask. Because I love you, Clara Thornton. I've loved you since the night I brought those babies to your door. Since you took them in without question. Since you looked at me like I was worth something. Clara couldn't breathe. You love me. More than I ever thought I could love anyone again. His eyes were bright with emotion. And if you don't feel the same, if this is too fast, I understand. But if there's even a chance, yes. The word came out before she could think about it. Before she could list all the reasons it was a bad idea, all the ways it could go wrong. Yes. Yes. I'll marry you. Clara laughed, tears streaming down her face. Today, tomorrow, right now, yes. Caleb pulled her close. Both babies squished between them and kissed her with a desperation that took her breath away. Hope grabbed a fistful of his hair. Honor started fussing. And Clara laughed against his mouth, tasting salt and joy, and something that felt terrifyingly like hope. We need a preacher, she said when they finally broke apart. Charlie can ride to town. Get Reverend Peters. It's a 2-hour ride each way. Then we'd better hurry. They were married that evening in Clara's kitchen with Charlie as witness, and the twins sleeping in their basket by the fire. Reverend Peters looked bewildered by the urgency, but performed the ceremony without complaint. I now pronounce you man and wife, he said. You may kiss the bride. Caleb kissed her softly, reverently, like she was something precious he was afraid of breaking. Mrs. Harding, he murmured against her lips. Mr. Harding, she replied. And despite everything, the senator coming tomorrow, the uncertain future, the fear that still coiled in her stomach, Clara felt a peace she hadn't known in years. Whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. Senator William Morrison arrived at noon the next day. Clara watched from the window as the fancy carriage rolled up the road, pulled by 4 matched black horses. Behind it came 2 more carriages, smaller but equally expensive-looking. He brought an army, Charlie muttered. He brought lawyers, Clara corrected. Which is worse? Caleb squeezed her hand. Remember what we talked about. Stay calm, let him talk, and don't let him see you're afraid. I'm not afraid. Liar? Despite everything, she almost smiled. The senator descended from his carriage like a king arriving at court. He was tall, silver-haired, impeccably dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Clara's entire ranch. His face was cold, aristocratic, completely unreadable. Behind him came a younger man, his secretary perhaps, and 2 hard-faced men who were clearly bodyguards. Clara stepped onto the porch, Caleb beside her, the babies in their arms. Senator Morrison, welcome to Thornton Creek Ranch. The senator's eyes went immediately to the twins. Something flickered in his face, pain maybe, or grief before the mask slammed back into place. Mrs. Thornton, I presume? Mrs. Harding, actually. As of yesterday. Morrison's eyebrow rose. You married? Yes, sir. Convenient timing. Clara refused to take the bait. My husband, Caleb Harding, he's the one who found your granddaughters at Dead Man's Crossing, brought them 40 miles through a blizzard to keep them safe. The senator's gaze moved to Caleb, assessing. So I've heard. Sheriff Morrison was very thorough in his reports. Then you know what those men planned to do. Ransom your granddaughters, and when they'd gotten their money... I know. Morrison's voice was clipped. I also know that you killed 3 of them and captured a 4th. We did what we had to do to protect those babies. Indeed. The senator was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the twins. Hope was watching him with her usual curiosity. Honor had her face buried against Caleb's chest. May I hold them? Clara's arms tightened reflexively around Honor, but Caleb touched her shoulder, a gentle reminder. Of course, she said, and handed the baby over. Morrison took Honor with surprising gentleness, cradling her against his expensive suit, without seeming to care about the inevitable spit-up. His face softened as he looked at her. She has Sarah's eyes, he said quietly. My daughter's eyes. I'm sorry for your loss. Are you... His gaze sharpened. Or are you sorry that my loss means I have a claim to these children? Clara's jaw tightened. Both, if I'm being honest. The senator actually smiled. Honesty. How refreshing. He looked at Hope still in Clara's arms. And this one? This is Hope. She's the brave one. Honor is more cautious. You already know their personalities. I've been caring for them day and night for nearly a week. I know everything about them. Clara met his eyes steadily. I know that Hope likes to be sung to sleep, but Honor prefers humming. I know that they calm down when they're held together like they're looking for each other. I know that they trust me. Trust us. She gestured to include Caleb. We're the only parents they remember. They're 4 months old. They don't remember anything. You'd be surprised what babies remember, Senator. Not facts or faces, feelings. Safety, love. Clara took a breath, fighting to keep her voice steady. They feel safe with us. They feel loved. Can you honestly say they'd feel the same with you? Morrison's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. I don't want to take them from people who love them, he said slowly. Contrary to what you might believe, I'm not a monster. I never said you were. You thought it. Clara didn't deny it. My daughter is dead, Morrison continued. My son-in-law is dead. My wife died 10 years ago. These babies are all I have left of Sarah. His voice cracked slightly on his daughter's name. Can you understand that? Can you understand what it feels like to look at them and see her face? I understand loss, Senator. I lost a daughter myself 3 years ago. Scarlet fever. She was 4 years old. Morrison went still. I didn't know. There's a lot you don't know about me. About us. Clara stepped closer, her voice softening. I know what it's like to lose a child. I know the hole it leaves, the way grief follows you everywhere. And I know that nothing can fill that hole. Not money, not power, not even 2 beautiful granddaughters who have your daughter's eyes. Then what do you suggest? Let them stay here, with us. Clara's heart was pounding, but her voice was steady. We'll raise them as our own, but we'll make sure they know about Sarah. About you. We'll tell them stories, show them pictures, make sure they understand where they came from. And I'm supposed to just, send a check every month, visit at Christmas. You're supposed to be their grandfather, not their owner, not their guardian, their grandfather. Clara took a breath. Come visit whenever you want. Stay as long as you like. Be part of their lives. But let them grow up here in a home with 2 parents who love them, not in some mansion in Virginia, being raised by servants. You presume to know how I would raise them. I presume to know what children need. They need stability, consistency. They need to wake up every morning knowing exactly where they are and who's going to be there for them. Clara's voice hardened. They've already had their world torn apart once. Don't do it to them again. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, looking down at Honor in his arms. The baby had fallen asleep, her tiny fist wrapped around his finger. My secretary has custody papers in the carriage, he finally said. Drafted by the best lawyers in Virginia. If I wanted, I could take these children right now, and there's nothing you could do to stop me. Clara's blood ran cold. Senator. But I'm not going to do that. She blinked. What? I'm not going to take them from you. Morrison looked up, and for the first time, Clara saw something human in his eyes. You're right. They need stability. They need love. And they need parents, not a grieving old man trying to recapture something he's already lost. You mean it? I mean it. He handed Honor back to Caleb with visible reluctance. I'll have my lawyers draw up new papers, adoption papers, making you their legal parents. Clara couldn't speak. Tears were streaming down her face, but she didn't care. However, Morrison continued, and her heart seized. I have conditions. What conditions? I want to be part of their lives. Regular visits, letters, photographs. I want them to know who their mother was, who I am. And when they're old enough to understand, I want them to know about their heritage. The Morrison name, the Morrison legacy. They don't have to claim it if they don't want to, but they should know it exists. That's all. That's all. Morrison's face softened slightly. You love them. I can see it in your eyes. And you, he turned to Caleb, you nearly died for them. That kind of devotion can't be bought or manufactured. It can only be earned. Caleb spoke for the first time. They earned it the moment I found them. Yes, I believe they did. The senator stepped back, adjusting his coat. I'll stay in town for a few days, work out the details with the local court. Then I'll return to Virginia. He paused. But I'll be back. In the spring, perhaps. To see how they're growing. You're always welcome here, Clara said, and meant it. Morrison nodded once, then turned and walked back to his carriage. His secretary scrambled to open the door. The bodyguards climbed into the second carriage. And just like that, the battle Clara had been bracing for was over. She stood on the porch, both babies now in her arms, watching the carriages disappear down the road. Her legs felt weak. Her hands were shaking, but the smile on her face felt like it might split her in two. He's not taking them, she whispered. Caleb, he's not taking them. I told you we'd figure it out. I thought... She broke off, laughing and crying at the same time. I thought we'd have to fight. Lawyers, courts, I don't know. I thought he'd want to destroy us. He just wanted to see them safe, same as us. Caleb wrapped his arm around her shoulders. Grief does strange things to people. Makes them build walls, push everyone away. But sometimes, if you're lucky, it breaks those walls down instead. Clara leaned into him, surrounded by warmth, despite the December cold. Is that what happened to you? Your walls came down. The moment I saw you running toward me that first night. The moment you looked at those babies like they were the most precious things in the world. Caleb pressed a kiss to her hair. I didn't stand a chance. Neither did I. They stood there for a long moment, two broken people who had somehow found each other, holding two babies who had somehow survived impossible odds. We should go inside, Caleb finally said. It's cold out here. In a minute. Clara tipped her face up to look at him. I just want to remember this feeling, this moment when everything changed. Everything changed the night I showed up half dead on your doorstep. Everything started to change then, but this... She gestured at the road where the senator's carriage had disappeared. This is when it became real, when I knew for sure that they were ours, really truly ours. They've been ours from the beginning, Clara. The papers are just... formalities. I know, but formalities matter, especially when powerful senators are involved. Caleb laughed softly. You were magnificent, you know, standing up to him like that. I thought he was going to have a heart attack when you told him not to treat them like property. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. My knees were shaking so hard I could barely stand. It didn't show. That's years of practice hiding how I really feel. Clara looked at him. But I don't want to do that anymore. Not with you. Not with our family. Then don't. Caleb's voice was soft. Tell me everything you feel. The good and the bad. The fears and the hopes. I want all of it. Even when I'm being irrational. Especially then. Clara laughed despite herself. You might regret saying that. Never. They went inside and Clara set the babies in their basket while she made coffee. Caleb sat at the kitchen table watching her move around the space that had become so familiar over the past week. We should think about additions, he said suddenly. Additions. To the house. Those girls are going to need their own room eventually. And if we're going to have the senator visiting, we'll need a proper guest room. Clara turned to look at him. You're already planning renovations. I'm planning a future. His eyes met hers. Our future. For the first time in 8 years, I'm actually thinking about what comes next. And I like what I see. She crossed to him, coffee forgotten, and cupped his face in her hands. What do you see? You, hope, honor, this ranch, a life that matters. Caleb turned his head to press a kiss to her palm. A reason to wake up in the morning. That's what you gave me too, when you showed up with those babies. Clara's voice was thick with emotion. I was just existing before, going through the motions, waiting to die if I'm honest. Clara. It's true. After Emmeline, after Thomas, I didn't see the point anymore. The ranch kept me busy, but it didn't keep me alive, not really. She took a breath. Then you came. You and those 2 tiny girls who needed me, and suddenly there was a point again. A reason. I felt the same way, Caleb admitted. 8 years of drifting, punishing myself for not being there to save Sarah and James. Then I found hope and honor, and it was like getting a second chance. A chance to do it right this time. We're doing it right, Clara said firmly. Both of us, together. Charlie knocked on the door, interrupting the moment. Sorry to bother you, but there's something you should see. Out by the north pasture. Clara and Caleb exchanged glances. What is it? Better if you just come look. They bundled up the babies. Clara refused to leave them alone, even for a moment, after everything that had happened, and followed Charlie out to the pasture. What they found made Clara's jaw drop. 20 head of cattle were grazing in the field. New cattle, young and healthy, with the Morrison brand clear on their flanks. Where did these come from? Caleb demanded. Senator's men drove them in while he was talking to you. Charlie was grinning despite his wounded shoulder. Said it was a wedding present. From the grandfather to the new parents of his granddaughters. Clara stared at the cattle, then at Caleb, then at the note Charlie handed her. Consider this the beginning of hope and honor's inheritance. Stop, every child deserves a secure future. Stop, more to come. Stop, W. Morrison. He's not just letting us keep them, she said slowly. He's helping us. Looks that way. But why? He could have just walked away. He didn't have to, because he's not a monster. Caleb's voice was quiet. Because he loved his daughter and he wants her children to have a good life, even if that life doesn't include him. He looked at Clara. People surprise you sometimes. Even rich, powerful senators from Virginia. Clara looked down at the babies in her arms. Hope was watching the cattle with wide-eyed fascination. Honor was asleep, completely oblivious to the gift that had just been given. We need to write to him, she said. Thank him properly. We will. And send him photographs. He said he wanted photographs. We'll do that too. And maybe, Clara hesitated, maybe we could name the ranch something different, something that includes all of them. Thomas, who built it, The Morrison family who helped save it, and us who'll keep it going. Caleb considered this. What did you have in mind? Clara looked out at the pasture, at the new cattle grazing alongside the old, at the land that had been her home for nearly 10 years. Hope Ranch, she said finally. After our daughter, and as a reminder of what we almost lost and what we found. Caleb smiled. Hope Ranch. I like it. They walked back to the house together, the sun setting behind them, casting long shadows across the frozen ground. It was Christmas Eve, Clara realized. She'd completely forgotten. We should do something, she said, to mark the day, even if it's just the four of us. What did you have in mind? I don't know. Something simple. She thought for a moment. When I was little, my mother used to read to us on Christmas Eve. Stories about miracles and second chances. About people who thought they had nothing finding out they had everything. Sounds about right for us. Clara laughed. It does, doesn't it? That night after the babies were fed and changed and settled into their basket, Clara and Caleb sat by the fire in the parlor. She held Honor while he held Hope, and she told them stories about a mother who loved them enough to die for them, about a cowboy who rode through hell to save them, about a woman who had lost everything, and found it again in the most unexpected way. The babies didn't understand the words, of course, but they listened with those big solemn eyes, and Clara liked to think they understood the feeling behind them. Love. Safety. Home. When the stories were done and the fire was burning low, Caleb reached over and took her hand. Merry Christmas, Clara Harding. Merry Christmas, Caleb Harding. It was, she realized, the first Christmas in 3 years that actually felt merry. The first one where she wasn't just surviving, but living. And as she looked at the man beside her and the babies in their arms, Clara knew with absolute certainty that this was only the beginning. Their family had been forged in fire and blood and desperate love. It had survived outlaws and senators and the kind of grief that broke most people. It would survive whatever came next too, because that's what family did. They survived. Together. Spring came late that year, but when it finally arrived, it came with a vengeance. Clara stood on the porch of Hope Ranch watching Caleb work with the new foals in the corral. The twins were 8 months old now, sitting up on their own, babbling in that mysterious language only they seemed to understand. Mama! Hope said suddenly, reaching toward Clara with grabby hands. Clara's heart stopped. What did you say, Mama? Hope repeated louder this time, more insistent. Caleb! Clara's voice cracked. Caleb, come here. He was at the porch in seconds, his face alarmed. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, listen. Clara knelt down to Hope's level. Can you say it again, sweetheart? Say it for Papa? Hope looked at Caleb, then back at Clara. Mama. Caleb's face transformed. Joy, wonder, and something that looked suspiciously like tears. Her first word, he breathed. Her first word. Clara was laughing and crying at the same time. And it was, Papa. Honor announced, not to be outdone by her sister. Caleb sat down hard on the porch steps, both hands over his face. His shoulders were shaking. Caleb. He looked up and Clara saw the tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. I never thought... His voice broke. After Sarah and James, I never thought I'd hear that again. Never thought anyone would call me... Clara wrapped her arms around him. The babies between them all, 4 of them tangled together on the porch steps. You're their papa, she whispered. You have been since the moment you found them. Papa. Hope said again, apparently delighted by the reaction she was getting. Mama. Honor countered. And despite everything, the hard winter, the outlaws, the senator, the fear, and the fighting, Clara felt something settle into place, something that had been broken for a very long time. This was her family, not the one she'd been born into, not the one she'd lost. A new one forged from tragedy and held together by choice. It was everything she'd ever wanted. Senator Morrison kept his word. He arrived in May with 3 wagons full of supplies furniture for the baby's new room clothes. They would grow into books they were too young to read, but that Clara would read to them every night. "You didn't have to do all this," Clara said as the ranch hands unloaded the wagons. "I wanted to." Morrison's face had changed since Christmas. The hard edges had softened. The cold aristocratic mask had cracked, revealing the grieving grandfather underneath. "I can't be here every day. Can't watch them grow up the way I would have if Sarah had lived. But I can make sure they never want for anything. They don't want for anything now. I know. That's why I trust you with them." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. "The adoption papers. Signed, sealed, and filed with the Virginia courts. Those girls are legally yours now. No one can ever take them from you." Clara's hands trembled as she took the envelope. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Thank yourself." Morrison's eyes were bright. "You fought for them when you could have walked away. You stood up to me when you had every reason to be afraid. That takes courage, Mrs. Harding. Real courage. I had help. Had." Clara glanced toward the corral where Caleb was showing the twins how to pet one of the gentler horses. "I couldn't have done any of it alone. That's the secret, isn't it? None of us can do it alone." Morrison followed her gaze. "He's a good man, your husband." "The best. Sarah would have liked him." The senator's voice was wistful. "She always had a weakness for strong, silent types. Said they were more interesting than the talkers." "She sounds like she was remarkable." "She was. Stubborn as a mule and twice as willful. Drove me crazy most days." Morrison smiled, despite the grief in his eyes. "Just like those 2 are going to drive you crazy. I'm counting on it." The senator stayed for a week. Clara watched as he slowly learned to be a grandfather, awkward at first, unsure how to hold the babies or what to say to them. But by the end of his visit, he was reading them stories in his deep, formal voice, letting them grab at his perfectly groomed beard, accepting their slobbery kisses with something approaching joy. "I'll be back in the fall," he said when it was time to leave. "If that's acceptable." "It's more than acceptable. It's welcome." Morrison nodded, his composure cracking just slightly. "Take care of them, Clara. Take care of all of them." "I will. I promise." She meant it with every fiber of her being. The summer passed in a blur of hard work and small miracles. The twins learned to crawl, then to pull themselves up on furniture, then to take their first wobbly steps. Hope walked first, stumbling across the kitchen toward Caleb with her arms outstretched. Honor followed a week later, more cautious, more deliberate, waiting until she was sure she could do it before she tried. "They're so different," Clara marveled one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Same face, same everything, but completely different people." Good. Caleb had both girls in his lap, one on each knee. World would be boring if everyone was the same. Hope's going to be trouble when she's older, already is trouble. "She gets that from you." Clara laughed. "I was never trouble. You faced down 4 armed outlaws and a United States senator in the same week. That's nothing but trouble. That's survival. Same thing sometimes." Caleb pressed a kiss to the top of each twin's head. "These girls are going to be survivors, just like their mama, just like their papa." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling in for the night. Charlie's voice carried from the bunkhouse, telling some story that made the other hands laugh. Horses nickered in the corral. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. "I've been thinking," Caleb said suddenly. "Dangerous pastime. About James, my son." Clara went still. Caleb rarely talked about the family he'd lost. Even now, 8 months into their marriage, there were walls she hadn't breached. "What about him?" "I used to think about him every day. Every single day, from the moment I woke up to the moment I fell asleep." Caleb's voice was rough. "His face was the last thing I saw at night. His voice was the first thing I heard in the morning. He haunted me." "And now?" Now I think about him, but it's different. It's not all I think about. He looked at her, his eyes vulnerable in a way she'd rarely seen. I think about hope and honor, about you, about this life we're building. And James, he's still there, still part of me. But he's not the only thing anymore. Is that okay? Does it feel like forgetting? No. It feels like... Caleb struggled for the word. It feels like healing. Like finally letting the wound close after years of picking at it. Clara reached over and took his hand. That's not betrayal. That's survival. I know. I just wish I'd been able to do it sooner. Wish I hadn't wasted so many years punishing myself. You weren't ready. And maybe... Clara hesitated. Maybe you needed to go through all of that to get here. To be the man who could save 2 babies and bring them home. To be the man who could love me. I would have loved you no matter what. Maybe. But you might not have been able to show it. Might not have been able to let yourself feel it. She squeezed his hand. Everything happens for a reason, Caleb. Even the terrible things. Especially the terrible things. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, my mother used to say that. When Pa died, when the crops failed, when things got hard. God has a plan, she'd say. Even when we can't see it. Do you believe that? I didn't used to. After Sarah and James, I thought if there was a God, he was cruel. Making me love them just to take them away. Caleb looked at the twins, already drowsing in his lap. But now I think maybe she was right. Maybe everything that happened, the loss, the grief, the 8 years of wandering, maybe it was all leading here. To them. To you. That's a lot of suffering just to get to one place. Maybe. But this place. He gestured at the ranch, at the babies, at Clara. This place is worth any amount of suffering. I'd do it all again. Every bit of it. If it meant ending up here. Clara blinked back tears. I'd do it again too. Even losing Emmeline. The question hit her like a blow. For a moment she couldn't breathe. I don't know, she admitted. I don't know if I could choose that. But I know that losing her made me who I am. Made me the kind of person who could take in 2 orphaned babies and love them like my own. She took a shaky breath. So maybe that's the answer. I didn't choose it. But I can choose what comes after. That's all any of us can do. The twins had fallen asleep, their small bodies warm and heavy against Caleb's chest. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder and closed her eyes. We should put them to bed, she murmured. In a minute. Just want to stay here a little longer. Okay. They sat there until the stars came out, holding their sleeping children, listening to the heartbeat of the land they'd made their home. The first anniversary of the baby's arrival came faster than Clara expected. She woke that December morning to find Caleb already gone from their bed. The twins were still sleeping, a rare occurrence these days, now that they were toddling around getting into everything. She found him at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold. Couldn't sleep. He looked up and she saw the shadows under his eyes. Thinking about last year. About what might have happened if I'd made different choices. Clara sat down across from him. What kind of choices? What if I hadn't heard the gunshots? What if I'd been working the south pasture instead of the north? What if I'd decided the weather was too bad to ride out at all? His voice was haunted. Those babies would have died, frozen in that wagon, and nobody would have found them until spring. But you did hear them. You did ride out. You did find them. I know, but it was so close, Clara. So close to going wrong. She reached across the table and took his hands. Everything is close to going wrong. Every day, every moment. We walk the edge all the time. The miracle isn't that bad things don't happen, it's that good things do, despite everything trying to stop them. When did you get so wise? Somewhere between the outlaws and the senator, I think. Caleb almost smiled. Almost. "I want to do something today," he said, "to mark the anniversary. Something that honors what happened, the good and the bad." "What did you have in mind?" "I want to visit Dead Man's Crossing." Clara's stomach dropped. "Caleb, I know it sounds morbid, but that's where their story started. Where our story started, really." He met her eyes. "I want to pay respects to Sarah and her husband and all the people who died there. I want the babies to know someday that we didn't forget." Clara was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. "All right. We'll go together." The ride to Dead Man's Crossing took most of the day. Clara held both twins in the wagon while Caleb drove the winter wind biting at their faces. When they arrived, she understood immediately why Caleb had needed to come. There were graves there now. 5 of them marked with simple wooden crosses. Sheriff Morrison had seen to it burying the victims properly after the investigation was concluded. Caleb helped Clara down from the wagon, and together they walked to the largest cross. The name carved into it made Clara's breath catch. Sarah Morrison, beloved mother. Below it, smaller, she gave everything to save her children. "Sheriff's idea," Caleb said quietly. "He asked me what should go on the markers. I told him that." Clara's eyes blurred with tears. "It's perfect." They stood there for a long time, the babies babbling in Clara's arms, completely unaware of the significance of this place. This was where their parents had died, where their mother had hidden them with her last breath, where everything had changed. "I'm going to tell them," Clara said suddenly. "When they're old enough to understand. I'm going to bring them here and tell them exactly what happened." "Are you sure it's a hard story?" "It's their story. They deserve to know it." Clara looked at the graves. Their mother was a hero. Their father was a hero. And they should know that the people who raised them were not replacements. Were continuations. Were carrying on what Sarah started when she hid them in that wagon. Caleb's arm came around her shoulders. "You're right." "I usually am." He actually laughed at that, the sound startling in the stillness. "We should head back," Clara said. "It'll be dark soon." "Wait." Caleb knelt by Sarah's grave. His head bowed. Clara couldn't hear what he said. The words were too soft, meant only for the woman who had given him back his purpose. But when he stood, his eyes were wet. "Thank you," he said loud enough for Clara to hear. "Thank you for trusting me with them. I'll keep them safe. I swear it." The wind picked up swirling snow around the graves like a benediction. Clara chose to believe it was Sarah's answer. They made it home just as darkness fell. Charlie had the fire going and dinner waiting, bless him. "Everything all right?" he asked, eyeing their somber faces. "Everything's fine." Clara handed him honor, who immediately grabbed for his beard. "We just needed to close a chapter. And open a new one." Something like that. That night, after the twins were asleep, Clara and Caleb sat by the fire in their bedroom. "1 year?" Clara said softly. 1 year since you showed up half dead with 2 babies. 1 year since you saved all 3 of us. I didn't do anything. You opened your door. You opened your heart. After everything you'd been through, you could have turned us away." Caleb took her hand. "But you didn't. You chose us." "I didn't feel like I had a choice. I saw those babies and something just clicked, like I'd been waiting for them without knowing it." "Maybe you were. Maybe we all were." Caleb was quiet for a moment. "Clara, I need to tell you something." Her heart stuttered. "What?" "I love you." He said it simply, without drama. "I know I've told you before, but I want to say it again. Properly. On this day of all days. You tell me every day. Not like this." He turned to face her, fully taking both her hands. "I love you for taking in those babies. I love you for standing up to outlaws and senators. I love you for being strong enough to hope again after everything you lost. But more than that, I love you for being you. For the way you sing to the twins when you think no one's listening. For the way you argue with Charlie about the best way to mend fences. For the way you look at me like I'm worth something." Clara couldn't speak. Her throat was too tight. "I spent 8 years convinced I didn't deserve happiness," Caleb continued. "Convinced I was meant to wander alone, punishing myself for something I couldn't have prevented. And then I found 2 babies in a burned-out wagon, and I brought them to you, and everything changed." "Caleb, let me finish." His voice was rough with emotion. "You showed me that it's possible to love again, to build again, to hope again. You showed me that the past doesn't have to define us, that we can choose our own future." He lifted her hands to his lips. "I choose you, Clara Harding. Today, tomorrow, every day for the rest of my life. I choose you and those girls and this life we're building. I choose it all." The tears were streaming down Clara's face now. She didn't try to stop them. "I choose you too," she whispered. "I choose all of it." Caleb pulled her into his arms, and they held each other as the fire burned low. No more words were needed. They'd said everything that mattered. Outside, the Wyoming wind sang through the eaves, carrying with it the promise of change, of new beginnings, of love found in the most unexpected places. The years passed as years do. The twins grew from toddlers to little girls, bright and curious, and completely different despite their identical faces. Hope was bold and fearless, always the first to try something new. Honor was cautious and thoughtful, watching and waiting before she moved. They called Clara Mama and Caleb Papa without a moment's hesitation. They knew about their birth parents. Clara made sure of it, telling them stories every night, showing them the locket Senator Morrison had given them, with Sarah and Daniel's pictures inside. "They loved you," Clara always said. "They loved you so much that your mama gave her life to save yours, and your papa fought until his last breath to protect your family. But you're our family now," Hope would say, snuggling closer. "We're all your family, the ones who came before and the ones who came after. Love doesn't divide, it multiplies." Senator Morrison visited every spring and fall, his formal demeanor gradually softening until the girls called him Grandpa Willie and climbed all over him without fear. Charlie became Uncle Charlie. Sheriff Morrison was Uncle Tom. Mrs. Henderson was the grandmother who brought cookies and unsolicited advice in equal measure. The ranch thrived. Caleb turned out to have a head for business that complemented Clara's practical skills. They expanded the herd, built new barns, hired more hands. Hope Ranch became known throughout the territory as a place of integrity and fair dealing. And through it all, Clara and Caleb loved each other, quietly, deeply, with the kind of love that doesn't need grand gestures or flowery words. The kind of love that shows itself in 1,000 small moments, a hand on the shoulder, a cup of coffee waiting, a shared glance across a crowded room. On the twins' 10th birthday, Clara stood on the porch of the ranch house, watching her family gather for the celebration. Hope and Honor were racing each other across the yard, their dark hair flying behind them. Caleb was talking to Charlie by the corral, both men laughing at something. Senator Morrison Frailer, now but still sharp-eyed, was being led to a chair by his nurse. And in Clara's heart, she felt the presence of everyone who couldn't be there. Thomas, who had built this house. Emmeline, who had taught her how to love. Sarah and Daniel Morrison, who had given her the greatest gift of all. Caleb caught her eye across the yard and smiled. That smile that had once been so rare, now given freely every day. "Mama." Hope came running up, breathless and dirty and absolutely perfect. "Mama, come see what we found by the creek. I'll be right there, sweetheart. Promise. Promise." Clara watched her daughter run off, then turned to look at the land around her. Her land. Her family. Her home. 10 years ago, she'd been a broken woman surviving, but not living, waiting for death without the courage to seek it. Then a cowboy had ridden up her road with 2 babies in his arms, too exhausted to breathe, and everything had changed. She'd been given a second chance. They all had. And they hadn't wasted it. That night, after the party was over and the guests had gone, Clara and Caleb sat on their porch for the 10,000th time, watching the stars come out. "Good day," Caleb said. "The best." Girls had fun. They always do. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" "Sometimes, but not as much as I used to." "Me neither." She was quiet for a moment. "I used to think about Emmeline every hour, then every day. Now I think about her when something reminds me. A song she liked, a flower she would have loved, but it doesn't hurt the same way anymore. That's healing. I know. I just wish I'd known back then that it was possible, that the pain wouldn't last forever. Would it have helped knowing?" Clara considered this. "Maybe not. Maybe we have to go through it to understand. Maybe that's the only way." Caleb pulled her closer. "The girls asked me something today." "What?" "They asked if I was their real papa." Clara's heart clenched. "What did you tell them?" "I told them the truth. That I wasn't there when they were born, but I was there when it mattered. That being a real papa isn't about blood, it's about showing up, every day, no matter what." "That's a good answer." Hope seemed satisfied. Honor had more questions, but she always does. Caleb smiled. "She's going to be a lawyer someday, that one. Or maybe a judge. And Hope's going to run this ranch. She's already better with horses than half the hands." Clara laughed. "You're probably right." They sat in comfortable silence listening to the night sounds of the prairie. Coyotes calling in the distance, an owl hooting somewhere nearby, the eternal whisper of wind through grass. Clara. Thank you." "For what?" "For everything. For saying yes when I asked you to marry me. For being their mother. For loving me when I didn't deserve it." Caleb's voice was thick with emotion. "For giving me a family when I thought I'd never have one again. You gave me the same thing. Then we're even." "We're not even. We're together." Clara lifted her head to look at him. "That's better than even." Caleb kissed her softly the way he'd kissed her 1,000 times before and would kiss her 1,000 times more. "I love you, Clara Harding." "I love you too, Caleb Harding." Above them the stars wheeled in their eternal dance. Inside the house their daughters slept peacefully, and on a ranch in Wyoming, a family that had been built from broken pieces, held together by choice and love, and the simple decision to stay settled in for another night. The story had begun in tragedy at a river crossing where 5 people died and 2 babies were hidden by a mother who loved them enough to sacrifice everything. It had continued through fire and blood, through outlaws and senators, through fear and doubt and the terrible risk of hope. And now it ended here on a porch in the starlight with 2 people who had found each other against all odds. Not a fairy tale ending. Real life didn't work that way, but something better. Something truer, something earned through suffering and sealed by choice. A family, a home, a love that would last, and in the end, that was the only happy ending that mattered.